Welcome to Getting Ghosted. This is an Intuitive Soul Collective podcast, and I'm your host, Allie Horner. Welcome back, everyone. Today's episode is all about 2026's energy, where we're heading, and almost as like a follow-up to last week's, we're going to talk about some more things that we see coming, why we see them coming, and more so the guides want to provide, guidance for you guys so that you can start to move forward into 2026 in a way that actually feels good. They're going to give you some tips as well as some things that will help you navigate the larger awakening that we have happening as a society. And now I do have them all sitting over here and they're ready to rock and roll. So let's get to it. Okay, so I've got Sam over here and he's saying, so what we want you guys to know is there's a lot more going on than meets the eye. And those who are really perceptive, those who are really, he's like, psychic, intuitive, those people are going to see it. He's like, they're going to see it before everyone else does. And he goes, this goes way beyond pattern recognition. This is a felt sense, a sixth sense of something, and almost a remembering. He said, a lot of you guys are going to remember that this time period, this energy is coming en masse, and you're going to remember it in your bones. It's not going to feel like, oh, this is new to me, I don't know how to navigate it. He said, for people who have really been he keeps saying it's unmistakable. For people who have been really perceptive their whole lives, he said they kind of came in with a mission, right? And he's showing all of these little babies being sent in with their little parachutes, and it's like these little souls being sent in to be born, and they're given these almost like missions that they have to complete. And he said, I wouldn't really put it that way for Earth because we don't really have missions on Earth. And he was like, but you can feel like you do. And he said that's the best word to describe it, right? He goes, so a lot of people are going to feel like they have, they came here for a purpose, they came here for something more, they came here for a mission. That's usually a bigger part of a spiritual awakening, but a lot of people have had these feelings since childhood on and off, and then they kind of numb them out. They're like, he's showing people being in school and just staying focused and trying to just be a normal kid or trying to be a normal teen, and then just trying to go about normal life and not let this feeling distract them. And then all of a sudden something happens in their life and the feeling comes back stronger than ever. And they're almost like fixated on it. They can't stop thinking about it. He said that's exactly what it is. And it's not a pattern recognition. It's a knowing. It's a deep knowing. It's almost like I've been here before and I'm remembering now why I came, or I can feel it on the, like, he's like, it's like that feeling of having something on the tip of your tongue, but you can't quite put words to it just yet or articulate it yet. And he said that's because when you are on what we would call like the path of intuition, the path of deep knowing, it's a wisdom within your body. And he keeps putting his hands over his gut, over his solar plexus, and then one over his heart, and then one over the solar plexus. And he's pointing between the sacral chakra and the solar plexus. So he's like going back and forth between the two. And he said, in your core, right? He keeps saying in your core, it's a knowing, it's a sensing, it's a feeling. It's not something that you are really going to be able to think your way through. And so he's showing me, he said the energy of 2026 is 2025 was huge catalyst year. And he said there have been other catalysts throughout history before, but we have been in sort of a spiritual dark age for a long time. And so we're coming out of this, and we're just at the beginning of this like sort of spiritual renaissance and spiritual evolution. And so what happens with this awakening is you have to feel your way through. And he's showing me previous videos that I've made and metaphors that they've given, and he's showing me the invisible path. So imagine you're walking through the woods and you're kind of out ahead, right? You know that there are people way back behind you and they're just kind of like moseying along, etc., following your lead, but they're way back there. And you look in front of you and there are two paths. One goes to the left and one goes to the right in the woods, in the dark. And the one to the left is not very well lit. There are obstacles all over the path. There are rocks, trees have fallen down. There's branches. Maybe there's like a river or a creek that crosses it that you would have to wade through or try to find your way through, things like that. And then to the right, it's wide open, well lit. It looks smooth. It's like very much clearly the clearer, smoother, easier path where you could just stroll through. But then for people who are really intuitive and perceptive, people who have this sixth sense really awakening in them or more dialed in by this point, what happens is a third way appears. This path is almost like an invisible set of stairs leading up to a pathway that goes up above the trees that are in the middle of the two paths on the ground. So you take this path and you walk up this path and you begin to see beyond things because you're above the trees. You look down and you can see people, and one group of people love the side on the ground that is all dimly lit and chaotic. They are, stuck in fear, or they're chaos lovers, chaos creators. They think it's an obstacle course. This is fun for them to have to wade through the muck and wade through the bullshit. But they're kind of scrambling over each other, climbing over each other, shoving each other down as they go, trying to make it through this path as well. So it's kind of an everyman for himself. They can't see as well, etc. And you walk over, and on the other side of this little walkway that you're on, this invisible path that unfolds beneath your feet, you can see down below on the right side, again, people are starting to calmly and clearly move through this path. They're linking arms. They're all walking arm in arm. They're laughing. They're talking. They're noticing how beautiful the path is, how easy it is. They're barely even thinking about it. They're kind of just all moving and chit-chatting and talking and having a great time. There's a lot of merriment, and they're just easily moving along that one because, again, it's smooth, it's wide open, it's well lit. They don't know where it's taking them. Neither group of people knows where this is taking them, but they're just, this group on the right is just having a blast. It's nice and easy, and they're just going for it. They have this air almost about them of life is easy for them. And then there's you on the third way. You're up above the trees, but you can't see this walkway itself. It's almost like in the last Indiana Jones movie, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, at least the one that I consider the last one out of the original three, where he has to cross the invisible bridge, and he realizes it's not that there's no bridge there, it's that it's an optical illusion, so you can't see where you're stepping next. You kind of have to just walk and step in faith. But because you're extrasensory and because you have this extrasensory perception, you can feel the steps as you're taking them. You can feel that invisible bridge, but you can't see it really. It's like you're up amongst the stars, and you're having to just trust that each step you take is to step on another piece of this invisible walkway amongst the stars. But you know that you can see everything below you. You can see where everyone else is going. And as you walk around along your path, you see this path along the stars, through the stars, start to come back down, and it comes back down out of the trees onto a wide open beach, where your guides and loved ones and ancestors and metaphysical teachers and multidimensional beings who love you and are here to guide you and support you are waiting with giant bonfires and campfires and a welcome home party. And you look to the sides and you realize that both of the other paths on the ground lead to this place as well. And so what we're seeing, and the reason that I'm telling you about this is because I want you to remember that there are more than one way to get to the same destination. And this year is going to show you what way you're choosing. And at any point in time, you have the choice to take a different route, to go a different way, to shift how you're maneuvering through life, the perception that you have of life. You have the choice to decide how you want to experience it. You have the choice to change things for yourself and for other people. But for people who are extrasensory and deeply perceptive, you are most likely on that feeling of walking the invisible path. You don't know where it's taking you. You just know that it's right for you. And as you keep going, you look back and you notice there are more and more people who are starting to take that path and who are a little scared, but they're taking that path and taking that walk of faith because they see you going first. Remember, you're out ahead of this a little bit more because that feeling, sensing, knowing is something that you do where you are kind of here to be another way shower and a change maker, someone who kind of shows the way by walking it first, not by telling people what to do all the time. Though some of you guys may be the type of people who are able to articulate these things, and so in your own unique ways and maybe in your unique type of work or industry, you are able to articulate what you sense and what you see and what you want to have happening as you go. But this in particular feels very unique, and it does feel like a path where you're going to feel alone at times, but you're not. In the year of 2026, this is a year where we're going to see more and more people aware that they're walking this new way, aware that they're going a way that hasn't really been done before, in a sense, but it's going to be exciting and inviting for people who are like, you know what? Like, I don't want to go this other way, right? Like, I know that this is just the right path to take for me. So they just keep going anyways. It's the walk of faith. And he said, this is also a good year for you to find your people. And so the best thing you can do to navigate 2026 is to find your people, to find your community, and to talk to other people about what you're sensing and experiencing. Practice using your psychic skills with them. Practice your, honing in your intuition in your everyday life. And I always, like, when I teach this, I call it everyday intuition, because we don't just want it to be like super woo-woo and out there, even though it can seem like it is. We want it to be applicable. We want there to be a practical application for your intuition. We don't want it to seem like something far-fetched and weird or spooky or stupid or silly. It really is something beautiful and wonderful that you can be using just to navigate everyday life. And the more that you do so, you never know who's watching and who will start to follow that lead. But you have to have a little bit of that faith and courage to go first. So it can help a lot if you can find groups of intuitive people or psychic mediums or spiritually inclined people who are also going through their awakenings, who you can work through this with. In this next year, we will see more and more of that. I think he's showing me a struggle between the hyper independence that we often see in Western societies versus getting together and gathering in community. And so where we're going to see more community and more gathering, as I've spoken of in previous podcasts, I think in episodes 8 and 9, and maybe some of the other ones around there, what we're going to be seeing more is a movement toward community, but it's going to be like little by little, because again, people are still figuring out who to trust and how to trust, especially with the online world and the comment sections being so volatile, and so many people having gone through major a lot of people are healing from family betrayal, from, there's a huge movement and awakening around emotionally immature parenting, around how we've created these, like we've had a system that's fueled emotional immaturity on so many levels. And we're going to see people pulling together into community, though, people who are ready for healing. Because sometimes we have to heal in the areas where we experienced hurt. And I know a lot of people won't be able to do that healing with the people that originally hurt them, but part of their healing will come through community and banding together and relationships, but healthier relationships. So this is going to be a really interesting year. So we're going to see some more of that community and bonding, but it's going to come in interesting and unexpected ways, in some ways very expected. The other piece he's showing me is, he said, remember, something else that you can do is you can find people who kind of get it and who get you, and people who are working on themselves and working on things that are, inspiring and bring them delight, surprise. And they're also in these sort of awakenings, but they aren't in this hyper independent me over you or us versus them type of mentality. They understand that those things are distracting, and that those things were created as distraction by certain people who want to maintain in power to keep us small and sick and scared and sad, to keep us disempowered. Because when we are in those energies, when we're focused on fear and separation, it's difficult for us to band together to create collective change. And that's where a lot of our awakening is going to come from. He's going, and in order to also be ready for that, to have the nervous system for that, we're going to see a lot of people, again, returning to analog culture, returning to more simplicity, returning to, again, like a lot of cozy and crafting, but I think we're going to see a lot more creativity this next year too. But creativity is difficult to have when you're overstimulated, when you're constantly anxious, when you're afraid. Your creativity really goes offline. A lot of people struggle to feel creative and to even feel the energy and get new ideas to be creative. They lack inspiration often when they're super crazy stressed out. And it's very rare that people are able to kind of shift that anxious energy into greater creativity. And so that's almost like something you have to train yourself to do. But a lot of people struggle to get new ideas when they're in the everyday slog of things. And so we're going to see greater and greater movements of people who become aware of this and who are banding together. Like I see a lot of people kind of sitting in their own homes, knitting, embroidery. And as I said in previous podcast episodes, way back when, a lot of people returning to the work of their hands, think simple, learning how to make their own things. We saw this a lot during the pandemic too, but it's not going to stop anytime soon. And I do think we'll still have technology, but again, 2026, we're going to see more of this analog, more of this, people wanting to return to the work of their hands, wanting to be offline more, wanting to sit down and read books and write books and, create. And we're going to see more community popping up around it. So again, think like the thrifting clubs, think crocheting clubs, think people getting together, swapping ideas, learning how to do things. I even saw this really wonderful TikTok. It was an older man who his passion is creating stained glass, and he started putting these little, his daughter used technology to get his stuff out there, and he wants to do these workshops and classes and stuff, and people have started to sign up for lessons with him to learn how to make stained glass. And I was like, that's exactly it, like that. We're going to see more people wanting to using online world for what it can be used for, maybe to reach new people in new ways, which is really I really think that's part of what it's supposed to be for. It's not supposed to be just the only place we're gathering information. But I think people are going to start to use it for more connection. And Sam is yes. And he said, so people are going to find new ways to get offline and to come together. And he's also showing me book clubs, knitting, people sitting down and knitting in the park. He's showing me full moon circles. And he said people getting together. He said, picture people getting together and going for a friendly walk outside around a park or a little hike or something like that. And they're talking about their awakenings, or they're talking about healing and movement. And he said, think a lot more outdoor therapy too. And he said, we will see a growing movement of people. We're already seeing people recognizing and understanding their connection to nature, which I talked about in the previous podcast episode. But he said, we're going to see even more of this. And he said, expect more people actually having outdoor group therapy where they're actually getting together and they're, sitting in the sun, they're sitting their butts on the ground, more therapy that integrates grounding and nature into the therapeutic techniques. And he's also showing me bilateral stimulation. He said, EMDR is really growing in popularity. And we're also understanding people can't really heal when they're just staying, at home in their same environment and they're not changing anything. They can work on their thoughts and their, nervous system as much as they want, but sometimes we have to actually change the environment that we're in and begin to take a step away from it in order to heal. And he said also physical places and spaces hold energy, and we will have more and more people aware of this, really psychically aware. And with that growing sensitivity, people are going to start to realize wow, I need to go somewhere that has really beautiful, open, grounding, nervous system regulating, energy elevating, energy. And so he said, in the best places for this is nature, trees, earth. He said, we're going to see more and more people, again, returning more and more to nature. And he said, so when people can't just move to it, right? And he said, because a lot of this is financial strain, people can't just move to the mountains. It's not financially viable for a lot of people, or they have family and friends where they're living and they're well, I can't just leave, you know what I mean? And so he said, so what we're going to see more and more is, he said, think more off-grid, eco-friendly, sustainable trips as well, where he said entire retreats where there's no phones, no technology, off-grid type of stuff. The other piece he's showing me again is people doing little everyday things to heal, but it being a part of formal therapy practice. And then he's also showing me therapy, spirituality, and mind, body, soul as a Venn diagram. And he said, so we're not going to see as much of therapy being on its own, again, as we mentioned earlier, but we're going to see people honoring the spiritual side, the soul, and more therapists have been. We have been seeing this a lot in certain areas. You can definitely find, therapists and, licensed, psychologists, etc., who have an understanding of spirituality or have certain spiritual beliefs where they understand where they're starting to look at things differently, right? And so he's saying, yeah, we're going to start to see more and more of this in 2026. You might see some actual movement around it or notice it more. He's showing me a little bit more later though, 2027 to 2030, there being maybe some new studies that come out, or he's showing schools of thought and programs changing again. And so he said, but in the meantime, what we're going to see are certain therapists who are starting to bridge the gap in the mental health space between mental health, nature, and maybe psychology and spirituality a little bit more. And he said, and it's about damn time, because we need more people that recognize that sometimes these nature and yoga retreats and stuff like that, he's showing sometimes these things can be really healing and really powerful and really helpful if really led well and, working well and stuff like that. And he said, but not everyone can afford that. So what we're going to see is more people doing things like walk and talks. He said, think therapists having sessions or doing group stuff outdoors, and more people healing through their community. And he's showing more and more group stuff. He's also showing more awareness of energy balancing and chakras, sound healing, things like that coming into the therapeutic space, which I feel like I've touched on before in the past, especially because I already know one or two therapists that are doing things like that. And he said, but think more and more of what used to be considered fringe or woo coming into the therapy space and becoming more normalized. He said, now 2026, we will see some movement in this most likely. And he said, so for example, past life regression, sound therapy, he said, because more and more of the research is supporting it. So he's showing some studies coming out, and he said things are more accessible because they're online. So people can look up these studies and share them more. Whereas years and years ago, they would get buried, right? If he said they would be counted as pseudoscience, they wouldn't be counted as something serious. And it's okay, well, if sound therapy doesn't work, then how come people can have such a big mood shift from literally walking out into nature versus sitting in the city with all the cars? And he said, that's a big sound difference and vibrational difference. And he said, and what about the fact that music can move someone to tears or suddenly completely change their mood from down in the dumps to feeling light and happy and inspired. And he said, there's going to be a lot more that comes out about this. And he said, especially because we have a lot of very neurosensitive, and he's saying, I wouldn't even call it neurodivergent anymore because it's half the population, but he said it will be more than half. And then it's who's really neurodivergent now, right? And so he said, but this population and more people are more sensitive to sound. And he's showing auditory processing stuff. And he said, so what we're going to be seeing is more and more research and stuff that comes out around sound therapy and sound healing. And he said, but that's not the only thing. It'll be a lot of meditation, again, being outdoors, more and more people returning to the earth for grounding, support, and therapy. And he said, again, we'll see more people honoring the earth and wanting to protect nature and stuff like that. And he was there are going to be some people trying to create technology to help people ground. So for example, grounding mats. And he's yeah, those can be nice, but also people can also go outdoors. And he said, but there are people, he said, for able-bodied people, that type of stuff is kind of hey, we'd rather have you go outdoors. And he said, and that would be my advice is really take to the outdoors over this next year. And he said, this next century is going to have a lot of shifts with this, big time understanding shifts in 100 years. Think how much can come out and change in just 2 or 3 years. Imagine 100 years from now. But he said this next 2026, in order to take grounded action, you're going to need to be outdoors. So you guys who are listening to a podcast like this one or podcasts similar to this, you're sensitive already. You already are psychic. You're already going through awakenings. You already know and sense and see more, or you're going to begin to. So this next year, because there's going to be a little bit more fiery energy and we're in this age of Aquarius, a lot of collective, larger global upheaval change. He's showing definitely definitely get yourselves outdoors every day. And he's showing sunlight, sunshine, using natural scents. And he keeps saying grounding techniques, like look up grounding techniques. And he's like, go outdoors, take your shoes off, put your feet on the earth, bundle up, go out for a good walk, keep your shoes on obviously, but like go out for a good walk, sit on a bench and close your eyes and breathe for a little bit. And he said a lot of you guys will really benefit if you take up techniques like breath work, especially during times of year, or if you are not able-bodied to go outdoors easily. Breathwork techniques are going to be paramount. He's showing a reconnection to the body coming. He said more and more people have been trying to escape their bodies. And he said with the return to analog, the return to simplicity, we're going to see a lot of people returning to the body, restoring connection to the body, pulling the soul self back in the body, not feeling like they have to be out of the body in order to survive life anymore. He's like, a lot of people walk around with their soul sort of like hovering a little bit, like they're back outside. And he's showing like people who kind of feel dissociated a lot or are trying to dissociate a lot because there's too much. He said we're going to become a lot more sound sensitive. So, and it's important though, because this is a clairaudient thing as well. Like it can open up your clairaudience. So what we're going to see is a lot of people starting to recognize this and almost sort of like do things to gain control over it in a good way. And he said, so we're going to see a lot more people practicing anything from breath work to yoga to tantra to like meditation. He's showing like mindful meditation therapy and meditation centers and retreats, and therapists using different meditation techniques, using different maybe even he's showing like hypnosis getting bigger and bigger. And he said also, again, like think sound therapy, energy work, people starting to talk about energy more. He said, the simplest way you see this is people talking about vibes, like, yeah, their vibes are off there. And he said it, but it's really literally like you can sense when someone's nervous system is out of whack. You can sense when someone doesn't have good intentions, when someone's stressed, etc., because you can sense their brainwave state. You can sense their nervous system state. You can sense their heart rate. You can sense even like immune system stuff that's going on. He goes, people are really perceptive, will feel it, but not know how to articulate it just yet. And so he said, for those of you guys who are really sensitive, you're going to need to ground more because, again, this next year, there's going to be a lot of that energy where that sensitivity and that psychicness is going to pick up. And he said it's going to make a lot of people feel things much more deeply. And so it will be important to have this analog culture and to have more and more of this time offline, more of this time outdoors, more of this time, connecting with people in a grounded, fun, loving way, finding community. And he's showing people co-regulating together. So finding people that you can co-regulate with or have cozy crafts and activities with. The other piece he's showing me is, again, more decline in order to help with regulation, more and more decline in, he's showing like meat eating, and alcohol. He said, now this is not just going to be in 2026. This will go on beyond that. And he said, we showed Allie like 5, 6, 7+ years ago that there would be a sharp decline in alcohol and there would be more and more mocktail and non-alcoholic beverage culture. And it's happened. I've definitely seen it, and we have more and more alternative sort of like craft cocktail type things where there are craft mocktails. I think we're going to see a little bit more of this in the future. I also keep seeing we're going to have more and more awareness around the use of THC, just because I think more and more people are starting to have experiences where THC use is throwing them into psychosis, as well as trying to quit suddenly is throwing them into psychosis. So we're going to see more changes there, not just in 2026, but after. More and more things coming out though. For example, like certain people who are prone to certain mental health disorders and things in their genetics or in their family systems, like even using THC or smoking pot just like once or taking an edible once can actually throw them into psychosis or flip that switch on. So we're going to see more and more awareness of how certain things are negatively impacting our bodies. But I also think it's not just going to be studies and stories coming out, though I see some of that kind of coming out and going viral at some point in 2026. I do see like a couple stories that keep popping up where it's going to be popping up on people's feeds and there will be some virality around it. Again, keep in mind, free will is always at play, so things can shift and change, but I think we're going to see some of that coming up in 2026 and 2027. But I do see a growing movement actually like kind of away from this type of stuff actually. And I also get the sense of, again, because people are going to be so energetically sensitive, they're not going to be able to eat and drink things or put things in their body that don't feel good. We're already seeing some of this with people who, again, are sensitive in general. But with a growing population of people that have to be on anti-inflammatory diets and all these different things, we're going to see even more of that as well. So we're going to see a growing movement, even more so around, not using certain, I would say like Band-Aids. We're not going to see as much of this like Band-Aid being put over things. I also get the sense of 2026 being a year where a lot of people find themselves. Now, something else Sam wants us to pay attention to in this next year is he said, get cozy, get comfortable, get grounded, so that when you feel the energy of, like he said, like feel the energy of support and gratitude. And he said the best place to feel support, like we said, is from the earth. The earth is here for us. The trees are here for us. The waters are here for us. The sky is here for us. The sun is here for us. And he said, in these types of, years and situations when so many people are struggling to find support, nature and the earth itself is where you can find that support. So anchor in. And he's showing me now that because there's going to be some fiery energy and energy of inspiration, dedication, movement, he said some of you guys are still going to have things washing away and changing, and that's going to be happening larger collectively as well, where we're kind of like trying to figure out like where do we want to take things in the future. So he said la passion, like people are going to have a very passionate year of, okay, no more fucking around, no more being tired, no more being, just like downtrodden or feeling helpless or hopeless or stuck. And he said, the more that you are doing what you need to do to feel aligned, regulated, etc., the more that energy you are going to have to download creative ideas, to anchor in to your intuition, to follow your intuitive hunches and nudges. And the more that you are going to be able to have the energy to follow through. He keeps showing someone who's had an idea forever and they're like, oh, I don't know, I just don't have the energy, I don't know. And it's because they're not taking care of themselves well. So they've had this idea on and off for years, but they haven't done anything about it. And then they just kind of let it sit in the back of their mind. And then all of a sudden this year feels like the year of they're like, okay, I'm going to do it, because it feels like he keeps saying less is more as well. Where this is a year where if you are getting into this kind of like action-oriented energy, it's going to feel really good in a sense. Like it's going to feel really exciting. But we want to be mindful, and mindful in the sense of discerning, about timing and about the way to do things. So just because, you feel like, hey, like I have to do this, we want to also be conscientious about how we're taking actions. Are you pushing a boulder up a hill, or are you finding the path of least resistance? Are you being conscientious and caring and compassionate and kind toward people in your community? Or are you just like, I'm going where I'm going, I'm building what I'm building, get the fuck out of my way. Right? Because this is not the time period where you can do that. Again, age of Aquarius, it's we over me. So we're all going through this evolution together. And with that, I see more and more people becoming aware of collective energy. And so a lot of you guys who are like worried about that, like, I don't want to be sucked under the collective. And I used to feel this way too. I used to get frustrated, like, why am I so sensitive to the larger collective energy or other people's energy? This is so frustrating. I found that the more I got regulated, the more I could feel what was going on with other people around me, but the less I put my energy out there to entangle, and the more I just started to understand that we can care, but we don't need to carry. And that's where I saw a lot of growth and momentum for myself and people around me. And I started to not feel like I had to be a victim to the collective energy. And I know a lot of people feel that way, especially people who self-identify as empaths. I see a lot of people, again, really taking the time to learn how to use their sensitivity as strength. So a lot of people use their sensitivity, and because they're so sensitive and because they don't have good teachers around it, they use it as almost like I wouldn't say a good type of anchor. It's like the type that you want to pull that anchor up and like start moving again and grooving and get, making your way to your destination, but you're stuck out at sea a lot. Because the sensitivity seems to almost kind of like hold you back because you're not using it in the way that you could be using it yet. And so a lot of what Sam is bringing up, the analog culture, more simplicity. In the previous episode, we talked about this more, so go back to that one if you're not sure what we're mentioning, but the connection to nature, the outdoors, the community, like co-regulation, finding people who are like, there's a lot of like matching up of soul groups right now. So people you can co-regulate with, people who delight and inspire you, or people that can work with you to, like where you're getting together and focusing on making things, crafting things, baking things, people who are aligned for you. This is going to be really helpful for very sensitive people. Because they're going to be able to start to pull those anchors up and actually start to make some movement for the first time in a long time too. Again, this is something we have to also say, I choose that. I choose to line up with it. And again, it's also going to be very important that we are getting enough rest and enough grounding. He's showing me you don't want to spin your wheels in the mud and end up burning out. So don't have too many irons in the fire. Don't have too many cooks in the kitchen. Like a lot of authenticity this year and a lot of alignment is possible and a lot of fast forward movement. And he keeps saying, and in a really good, easy, bright way. So just remember, don't feel like you need to push the boulder up the hill this year. Don't make it more difficult than it has to be. Try to let yourself lean into like what is fun, inspired, easy, collaborative, and you're going to see a lot of really great progression and movement forward if you're able to do those things. The other piece he's showing me is more spiritual awakening around animals and animal culture. And he said because of this also, we're going to see, again, like more vegetarianism. And 2026 feels like, again, just early stages of this. But he said, more and more people are coming into the awareness that like animals have souls. And he said, I know it sounds kind of funny for those of you who are like, of course they have souls. Like, have you never had a dog? Some people never had pets. And he said, but we're going to see a lot more awareness and not just around like, oh, dogs or cats, like household pets. He's showing me around, like animals like cows and chickens and stuff. And he said, the things that you eat, fish. He's like, and so he said, we're going to see more and more of this vegetarian movement because we're going to see more sensitive people not be able to eat animals that had the emotions, and the hormones, and he's showing like sensitivity to different things growing. He said, we're going to see more and more people aware of like, the condition the animal died in, things like that, and being able to feel it. He said, so what you might see is people being literally like repelled by meat. And he said, there are some people who can describe this already, but we're going to see more of a movement toward this in the coming years. And he said also, for some people, it's very grounding for them to return more to being outdoors, getting their energy from light. He's showing people getting their energy from light, like from the sunlight, from natural light, and from nature versus like just seeing food as energy. And he said, I'm not trying to incite people to starve themselves or go like, you don't need to like be a breather Aryan or sit in the sun all day long and like get skin cancer or whatever. He's like, it's not medical advice. Different people have different needs, but he's showing a growing movement of people just recognizing like less is more in certain ways. He said, think like intuitive eating. So people recognizing, here's what I need for me right now. Here's what feels right for me right now. And he said less of the eating disorder culture, less of the culture of this is right, that's wrong, black and white thinking. And he said there will be some pushes towards some fad diets in the years to come. So definitely be careful and mindful for those of you guys who get wrapped in that really easily. He said, but what's happening is as your spiritual awakenings happen on a larger collective level, we will see more and more people becoming aware of and trusting their intuition and their body and what their body's telling them they need in terms of food, light, movement. He's showing, placing his hands in the ground, earth, nature. And he said, we talked about this a little bit more previously with people growing their own food, their own herbs, things like that. And he said, a need to feel connected to what we're growing. And he said, and sustaining, and he said, recognizing energy comes from many sources, not just from eating. And he said, this is going to be a growing movement. And also he's showing maybe scientific study coming out around it, although I don't know that all that's going to come in 2026. So keep in mind too, sometimes when they start talking about things, they get really excited and they'll give me big downloads. And it doesn't mean it's all going to happen this year. So just keep that in mind. So it's like they'll show me like a larger string of energy or path of flow of energy going out, and it could be like out into the years ahead, not just into this year as well. Now, another topic I know people have been itching to ask about is extraterrestrial contact. So I don't have any particular predictions I want to make on this in terms of ET contact and disclosure and all of that stuff. We've already seen little drops and waves of disclosure in the past, but Sam is showing me, he said, rather than talk about what's going to exactly happen when, because he's like, it's a very funky on and off switch type of energy. And he's like, and different people have different contact already. He said, what we're going to see more and more of this year is people becoming aware of their multidimensional selves. So extrasensory perception. And he said, of course, psychic mediumship and contact with angels and guides on the other side, and people, having more synesthesia and having, he said, well, you guys call it synesthesia. We just call it the clairs, right? Seeing sounds and seeing energy and feeling energy and knowing things before they happen, precognizant dreams, psychic dreams, things like that. And he said claircognizance, knowing things without having an explanation for knowing them. And he said this will also help a lot with preparedness. And also, he said not just prediction, but preparedness and people learning how to shift energy before it occurs. And he said this has long been a question. And there's actually entire books about this that I've mentioned in previous episodes of the podcast and previous more movements. But he said, we're going to see more and more people recognizing that they can shift and help to heal the planet and the earth through larger group meditation, and metaphysical understandings are part of that. He said, now, not everyone needs to understand all the science in order to do that work. A lot of people, actually less is more. They just are like, I don't know, I just do this energy healing work, or I just do yada, yada, and it changes things. They don't need to know how or why, but we will see the scientific community start to catch up a little bit in, the decades to come. That said, the ET contact piece, he keeps saying the multidimensional self is very vast and it's bigger than you can imagine. So he said, what's going to happen is we're going to have more and more people talking about it. He's like talking, like doing those little hand talk things. And he said, but we're not going to see very likely a full disclosure unless that realm, that extraterrestrial higher dimensional realm, feels that the energy is prepared, that the timing is right. We're not going to see a formal disclosure in, the years, months, weeks ahead. He said, now, that all said, that doesn't mean that it can't happen or won't happen. That may shift and change, but what we're going to be seeing a lot is more and more people talking to and talking about extraterrestrials and having more contact telepathically. He said most people don't actually see them. They might see glowing orbs or he said like the blue light beings often show themselves as like these blue light figures. And he said, so we're going to have people having these types of experiences, but he said, you have to remember these beings are multidimensional. They're not like 3D beings. So we're going to have a lot of mind's eye type of contact and people channeling them and bringing them through using their voice box. And he said, using their own clear conduit channeling abilities. He said there's already plenty of channelers who do this. There's many people who have contact privately as well, and they'll never talk about it publicly. He said, but this is part of what we're going to see this upcoming year is more people coming out with it and sharing and sending messages that are here to help humanity. And he said, we want you to remember these beings that are coming through, that are light beings, that are extraterrestrial in nature. He said, this is the kicker. A lot of them are future humans. They're humans from way, way, way out in the future, very advanced beings from different star systems and more. And they're here to help us. They want to help humanity. They understand it's not a chicken or an egg situation. And he was like, they understand the flow of energy and time as nonlinear. And he said, think movies like Interstellar or Arrival as hinting at this. And he said, having these movies come out is already hinting at the fact that we're having an awakening of the multidimensional self, right? And he said, if you haven't seen those movies, go watch them because they're starting to give some of those like plugging in that information in a way that humans would be able to grasp and understand a little bit better. And he keeps saying, but what's happening is we're going to see more channelers come out with it and more messages come out with it and more movies. And we already have, there's one coming out soon. I forget what it's called, but it's got Emily Blunt in it. And it's like she channels aliens or something. And so he said, we're not going to see stuff where it's like scary. And he said, so, but you're going to have to be careful because some people hop into the fear frequency. And so their interpretation on things is really like they project their fears onto it. And he said, same thing with spirit, like people project their fears onto it. They don't need to do that, but they do. And then they go online or they write a book or they tell all their friends and it starts all this folklore. It starts all these scary stories and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, and then people get afraid. And before you know it, you got like, everyone's like, oh man, that's not what we were doing. And he said, because human perception, your consciousness is very fear-minded on Earth as a collective. And so he said, but this higher dimensional technology is going to come through the mind. And he said, it's going to help humans evolve and develop in a really prosperous, like loving way. And he said it's more and more benevolence. And he said, so these groups of beings are here to help you, but they won't interfere with free will. And he said, just like spiritual guides and ancestors and teams of light. And he said, hint, hint, most of you guys have multidimensional ET beings also as your teams of light and your spiritual guides. And he said, because you guys are multidimensional creatures as well. You just don't remember that. So he said, in terms of like disclosure and stuff, and he's like, I don't know, I'd slow your roll on things like that. He said, but it could happen. It could happen this year, but you have to remember things shift and change. And, these higher beings also understand like, hey, what's actually going to go over well in terms of the collective and stuff. And he said, we also have to remember there already has been disclosure many times over, just people like gloss over it or whatever they say it's fake news. He said, now that on that note, this year you're going to have to be really careful about fake news. And he said, this is also why we're going to see more of a return to analog and people wanting to create and not just consume and create with their hands, not just create online. And so those movements, that type of passion project type of stuff is going to come up more because there will be some fake news that comes out too. Wanted to mention too, I think we're going to have even more come out around, so we were talking about animals. I think we're going to have even more come out around spirit and animal communication. So like telepathy. We've talked about, and we've seen more and more people coming out with their talk of animal communication, right? So they can talk to people's animals, they can talk to their pets, things like that. What I think we're going to see is more awareness around that and more people trying it and realizing that they can do it. And in addition, I get the sense of, this is hard to describe, but just the same way that I channel the guides and provide wisdom to you or their messages to you, I think we will see more people coming out who actually have messages from certain animals or groups of animals to help humanity. Okay, it feels like we're kind of wrapped up. Sorry, we were kind of jumping around from topic to topic, but I felt like it was like I would channel on one thing and then it would start to blend into the next thing. And then I went about my day a little bit and then something new popped in and I went, oh wait, I have to go back and record that. So that's why it jumped a little bit. So apologies for that, guys, but sometimes that is just what it's like when you're working with the other side. But I really hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. I will be bringing out the 2026 energy guide here soon. Like I said, January doesn't always feel like the start of a new year for me, but I understand most people are kind of rolling, like we all roll with that timing. So my plan and hope is to have it coming out pretty soon here. As always, I release that type of stuff to my Patreon membership group first and to my email list first. And we'll put it on my website when it's ready to be purchased. But those groups usually get it at a discount. If not for free. So just keep in mind that will be available too. And that will give you some reflections, some prompts, some information on upcoming energy waves, and also some more information about things that you can do to help to navigate the upcoming year. Okay. How you can use your free will and your choice really well, information about the spiritual guidance that you might need. And I hope that will be really helpful and beneficial to you. In addition, I do have a new Patreon tier for those of you guys who didn't see. It's the new Ascend membership level. It is essentially, when you sign up for that one, you get everything in the levels below it. And you also get everything in Channelers and Changemakers, which is all of the classes that I have put in there. And then, and I think there's like 15 plus classes already in Channelers and Changemakers from the last year or so. And so you get to have access to those all right away. And then in addition, in Ascend group, you get a monthly reading and spiritual guidance to help you with your spiritual awakening journey and anything else that you might have going on. In addition, that group gets a trans-channeled message from the guides each month. So, and then, like I said, they get monthly private readings. So for that group, there are a limited number of spots just so that I can conserve my energy for my monthly readings, and then, have people in there who are really dedicated to working with higher energy, working through their spiritual awakenings, and whatever else you might need support for. So feel free to come and check that out. I'll have that linked in the show notes or in the link in my bio, depending on where you listen to this podcast. I hope that you guys like this episode. If you have more questions about anything that has to do with psychic mediumship, intuition, the energy of 2026, if you have questions about spiritual awakenings and need guidance or support directives on that, feel free to ask your questions using the link in the show notes. There's a page on my website where you can submit questions, and feel free to submit your amazing stories and synchronicities and signs and cool spiritual experiences that you're having. I would love to hear about them and even feature them on a future episode of the podcast. Thanks, everyone.